Yeah, the intent was to show people more in a real time kind of how things happened, and that's sort of why we did a bit of an act as well with it, is to really demonstrate how things happened and what it was like for those girls and those people. They really used the innocent people there to their advantage as well, and to spin the world's narrative poorly towards us.
You will no doubt recall just a couple months ago on October 7th, Israel endured a horrific attack at the hands of Hamas terrorists. Folks in one of the most horrific scenes at a music festival, largely youth and young adults, expecting to see music, instead encountered gunfire, murder, and rape. A truly horrific incident that in the following days was condemned largely around the world. But since that time, in the passing months, people have seemingly forgotten or engaged in active denialism of what happened. They have entered into the narrative of Israel as oppressor and Palestinians, and in fact Hamas, as oppressed. Well, that narrative simply doesn't jive with reality, and one Israel supporter within the Calgary area took to City Hall to launch a demonstration reminding folks of the horrors that unfolded on October 7th.
So our sort of inspiration was, we've seen a few other places around the world do basically the same thing that we did, and we thought it was a really good way to get people to realize more what happened, and instead of denying it, have to look at it face on and accept that this is kind of what is going on.
And do you have a personal connection to Israel? What sort of brought you out to sort of stand in support of Israel?
I do. I'm Jewish and an Israeli citizen, and I also have friends who are more like family in Israel that are in the army that I care about more than anything.
Rex Murphy was at a pro-Israel rally or protest demonstration the other day, and he said, like, if this had happened to any other nation, if it had happened in North America, if it had happened to some Western European nation less than a few months ago, people would be beside themselves. This was a horrific incident.
If that had occurred in England, in France, in Australia, in any Western country, those numbers, that butchery, that savagery, that extremity of rape, that hauling away of children, the world would still be spinning with horror and rage. And yet so many have attempted to erase that day.
Why do you think it is that people in the West, just a couple months later, have been so quick to forget the horror of what happened?
Because people in the West really have no idea how to deal with something like this. Nothing like this has ever happened in the West, and hopefully it never will. That being said, if Israel doesn't get this stomped out, it could be that the West is next. But we don't know how to handle it. Most people, it's just news to them. They're not connected to it. It doesn't matter to them. So there's quickly to forget. It's the next news article and move on. Same with everything else.
Now, the sort of concept of denialism, I mean, it's a sensitive concept to Jewish history, whether it be the Holocaust or other things. But we have seen a very sort of overt denialism, because probably in the couple of days after this happened, other than ardent pro-Hamas supporters, there was a sort of collective rejection and condemnation of what happened. But in the time since that, there's been this shift towards, well, Israel is the oppressor, and therefore the murders, the rapes, the attacks, the kids at a music festival being massacred, that's all okay, apparently, in the minds of people. How do you think we got to a point where we went from, no, this is bad and should be condemned, to a shocking amount of people being in support of what, not necessarily what happened, but the message behind it, at least?
Well, unfortunately, I think Hamas's PR game is a lot better than anybody else's in the world. They're able to sell things to people by blatantly telling you to your face that we want to kill you, and people still won't believe them. So it very quickly turns around on the Jews, because we look like the bad ones because we defend ourselves, and nobody ever likes it when a Jew defends themselves.
Now, that's sort of part of your message, too, there, with the sort of Me Too, except if you're a Jew mentality, the double standards that are clearly being applied here. The message, the demonstration, you sort of being tied up, wearing clothing similar to those victims there who experienced rape and unimaginable horrors. Was the intent to shock people into remembering what happened?
Yeah, the intent was to show people more in a real time kind of how things happened, and that's sort of why we did a bit of an act as well with it, is to really demonstrate how things happened and what it was like for those girls and those people.
Now, this is extended beyond just a conflict occurring overseas. It's extended beyond just people who have family or friends there. We've started to see incidents of just anti-Semitism here, and some of them are absolutely glaring and problematic, like shots being fired at Jewish schools.
Because Hitler knew how to deal with these people.
But even more recently, we saw a bus trip, basically that the Jewish community paid for buses, and they took the money and then didn't show up and refused to drive them. I mean, there's a laundry list of anti-Semitic events that have occurred since this event in Canada. How problematic is it to see those events occurring here?
Well, to be honest, it's nothing new at all. My family was attacked in 2014, and Rebel News actually did an interview for them then. So really, it's unfortunately nothing we're not used to, but it is very problematic to see that it's getting worse and worse, because you never know what's going to happen.
I mean, we just saw the UN tweet out no means no in virtually every language except Hebrew recently, especially with the sensitivity of what just happened. You'd think they'd be on top of that. I'd suggest it's probably intentional. But this idea that we should believe women, it seems like, let's say you're a Jewish woman who's raped by someone from Hamas, that they don't necessarily deserve to be believed. Or if, say, you're an athlete being assaulted by someone who happens to be trans or whatever, there's this sort of hierarchy of oppressed and oppressor taking place here. Why is it that a Hamas terrorist is basically like higher or lower, however you look at it, on the oppression totem pole than a woman who's being raped and murdered?
Well, in my personal opinion, it's because Hamas and the Palestinian people are the tool of the Arab world to continuously torture Israel in every way that they can, and torture the Palestinians in every way that they can. They really use the innocent people there to their advantage as well, and to spin the world's narrative poorly towards us.
Now, I suppose that's another question I have for you. Some people referring, I think for most people, they might be like, well, I'm sympathetic to Palestinians, but I'm very much against Hamas. But we have seen people overtly saying that, no, they support Hamas. Hamas is a valid resistance and a legitimate resistance, and Israel is just an oppressor. How concerned should we be that people who are coming into Canada share those values?
I think we should be very concerned about it. And the more and more of them that come, I mean, we see it on the streets of Calgary every Sunday, the violent signs, the blatant hatred, and even just the complete disregard for Canadian laws.
What do you think it takes? I mean, you often hear, echoing back to the sort of the Holocaust, this never again or never forget, but how quick are we to forget when genocidal slogans are being chanted, when people are justifying rape, murder, whatever it may be against Israelis? What has to happen for people to actually basically wake up and realize that there's a very real risk that the people who are calling for the eradication of all Jews in Israel may succeed?
I'm honestly not sure there's a whole lot of a way to change the narrative in regards to the non-Jewish community. In the Jewish community, I think that never again means nothing if we aren't willing to do something about it, if we aren't willing to stand up, and if we aren't willing to learn how to defend ourselves through taking Krav Maga or whatever other means you think necessary, is really the only way to ensure that we have our state still and that we have our people.
And maybe just for folks at home who haven't lived through something like this, who've always been in North America, particularly in Canada, we're quite privileged, quite comfortable. The reality that at any day a rocket can come flying over, hundreds of rockets can come flying over. What is that reality like for people that you have dual citizenship? What's that reality like?
It's a norm, honestly. Most people, they know how to get to the Mamad, which is the bomb shelter, quick enough, or into the hallway in their apartment. It's a normality for the people in the south, especially. For people in the north and in Tel Aviv, it's a little bit different and a little bit more shocking, but mostly it's normal. One of my best friends who lives here, she moved here when she was 16 from Israel, and they told her that she was really fast on the track team, and she said, oh, that's because I have to run from rockets for my whole life.
Is this just overt anti-Semitism? Is that really what we're seeing?
Yeah, it's just overt Jew hatred and hatred for Western values as well. If you look at any of their protests, see if you can spot a Canadian flag, because I bet you can't.
For more of our coverage on the Israeli-Hamas conflict, go to thetruthaboutthewar.com.